AUREON, the Charter of Light. A bedtime story in the time before time, when day and night still whispered each other's name. There was a city built of silence and gold. It was called AUREON, and it floated on the edge of the sky, where the winds did not blow and thoughts had color. In that city lived a man named AUREON. He was an artist, an inventor, a star watcher, and a dream drawer. They said he had learned to listen to the flow of a river without water, to measure the shadow of a flame, and to hear the music of closed books. But within him was a quiet hunger, not for fame, not for power, but for truth. Not the one people speak of, but the one even the gods cannot explain. For years, AUREON created one single object. It was Luminor, a mirror made of light and thought, which did not reflect but revealed essence. When he finally finished it, he took it into a room without shadow and gazed into its core. What he saw was not himself. It was the shadow of his own soul, silent, old, and unknown, and something deeper still, as if behind that darkness the gaze of a being that had been watching him for thousands of years was waiting. That night, AUREON trembled for the first time. At dawn, AUREON left the city. He left behind everything he knew: books, paintings, devices, his name. He carried only a thread of light that shone from his palms, a sign that the path ahead was not mapped. His journey led him far, to a land where day does not remember night, to the underground temple of shadows. There, in the heart of the world, among vaults of ash and stone, lived Moira, she who weaves the threads of fate. She did not speak much. She only showed him the fabric that stretched through all the ages, from the first thought to the last sorrow. In that endless weave, AUREON saw himself, not as a hero, but as a question that someone once forgot to ask. In the temple, he found the book of the first flame, written before language, before light. As he read, the world lost shape. Concepts melted away, time coiled like smoke, and his body became a transparent cloud of thought. His shadow, until then silent, began to move independently, and while his mind absorbed the knowledge of the gods, his heart began to forget who he was. But Moira gave him a gift, a thread that no fate could sever, and without sound she said, "It will remind you." The path led him further to the Mountain of Winds, where the Sibyl of Time resided, a spirit who sees what is yet to be. There, under a breathing sky, AUREON first saw the world that might become if his knowledge outweighed the balance of existence. He saw people without souls, gods without power, a world where everything was explained, but nothing was sacred. Then he realized, it is not knowledge that changes the world, but the question that remains unanswered. He discarded the remnants of the book and headed for the final place, the source of all, where the world was born from silence. There, where even time does not reach, he found not light nor darkness, but sound, the first thought, and in it, peace. When he returned, AUREON did not recognize him. People looked at him as a stranger. The streets were the same, but quieter. His room was empty. Only a boy, wandering the halls of the old tower, found a shard of Luminor, forgotten under the dust. When he looked into it, in his eyes flickered a moment that had no name, and somewhere far away, among the threads that know neither day nor night, a light blinked, satisfied, and the world could continue dreaming. Chapter 2. Winds That Remember. The path AUREON took after returning from the Temple of Shadows was neither straight nor familiar. It was no longer an earthly path, but one through layers of time, as if he had become the voice of the past, not yet spoken. Before him lay the Mountain of Winds, the place where, according to ancient legends, all lost breaths remain to rustle in silence, and every word spoken without purpose is trapped in the clouds. The climb was slow. The wind spoke the language of memory, and every step awakened images that were not his. Dying worlds, sleeping gods, ancient cities, forgotten even by forgetfulness. But AUREON did not falter. His body was no longer just flesh. In his veins flowed a whisper. Instead of fatigue, he was carried by the thought that each step toward the summit led to the resolution of a question that was now a part of him. At the very top of the mountain, where not even shadows existed, sat the Sibyl of Time, not in form, but as a presence that permeated the air. She did not greet him. She didn't have to, for all who reach her already know the question they did not know to ask. There, without words, AUREON felt, saw, understood. He saw a world in which his quest for knowledge had not brought enlightenment, but the quiet death of wonder, where people knew how everything worked, but no longer knew how to sing, where gods became concepts, and concepts became tools, where there were no secrets and no trust. And in that world, at the summit of knowledge, he sat, alone, surrounded by everything, but without anyone. The Sibyl showed him something else, what was and what could still be. In the parallel currents of time, AUREON saw himself discarding knowledge and choosing forgetfulness. He saw himself remaining a painter, not a prophet. He saw himself guarding secrets rather than revealing them, and how, precisely because of that, the world continued to breathe, imperfect but alive. The mountain did not give him a decision, only a choice, and the wind quieted. The descent from the mountain was quieter than the ascent. He no longer carried questions, nor answers, only a thread, the same one Moira had given him, now brighter, calmer, as though it too knew the path had found its meaning. AUREON did not return to the world to learn nor to teach. He did not bring a new religion or new science. He returned as a man. In the valley below the mountain, he found a shard of luminor. It was cold, but when he placed his fingers on it, it quietly shone. And in that light, he saw neither shadow nor future, only a leaf falling from a tree. And that was enough. In a world where he wanted to know everything, he learned the hardest lesson. Some secrets are not meant to be discovered. They are meant to be kept and loved, just like the silence before sleep. Chapter 3. The War That No One Declared. Where the wind ceased to remember begins the space of silence, and above it, a sky that knows neither day nor night. In that timelessness, AUREON felt something that no knowledge could predict, the unease of the gods. The gods were not what people imagined them to be. They were not eternal nor omnipotent. They were ancient forces born of first choices. Some were created from the moment of love, others from fear, and others from a question that never received an answer. Their faces changed according to the faith that fed them, and slowly that faith began to fade. For AUREON, unknowingly, was the spark of this process. When he touched the first book, when he uncovered its secrets and bared its symbols, he did not only bring insight to himself, he shook the balance between worlds. For truth does not bring peace to those who exist through mystery. In the sky, which until then had never changed color, a crack appeared, and through it reflected two opposites, Thalaron, the ancient being of light, and Verakth, the shadow formed by the first denial. They did not speak. They did not even look at each other. But the presence of one was an insult to the other. The war did not begin as an explosion. It was not even heard. It started as a shift in balance, as a silent decay of meaning. The sea ceased to move. Birds began to fly in circles. People forgot the language, but they remembered dreams they never dreamed. AUREON knew it was not his task to choose a side, for light and darkness are not opposites. They are part of the same breath, and the struggle between them, the struggle of one being with its own reflection. In this war, there were no winners, only consequences. At one point, above the world, the eye of all opened, an ancient presence that watched existence from afar, without emotion, without purpose, without judgment. Its gaze encompassed everything, and all that it touched stopped. Time, thought, even memory. AUREON stood upright. In his hands he held the thread Moira had once given him, and then he understood. The threads that connect us to the world do not bind reality to the body. They bind meaning to the soul. He did not try to save the gods, nor to judge them. He only, in the heart of silence, tied the thread around the shard of luminor and cast it into the sky. The mirror of truth, bound to the thread of the soul, flew through the crack of light and scattered among the stars. And each star, from that moment on, carried a shard of the question. That's why the night shines. The war of the gods ended without an end. They did not disappear. They only withdrew to the boundaries between worlds, waiting to be summoned again by faith, fear, or knowledge. AUREON descended from the place where the war left silence. He carried peace, not the one that comes after battle, but the one that comes when you know nothing more needs to be known. Chapter 4. The return to what is. After a long journey, AUREON walked through a valley that had no name. It was neither light nor dark. It was a place in between. There he met a child. The boy did not speak, but in his eyes he carried the light of the shards that had scattered into the night. In his hands he held a piece of luminor, the very same one that once revealed truth, but now it only shone. The child approached him, offered the mirror, and rested his forehead against it, and nothing was said, because everything was clear. In that moment, AUREON understood that he had never been in search of knowledge. He had been searching for calm, for a space where a question can exist without the need to be answered, for a place where the soul can breathe. And so he remained, not as a prophet, not as a god, but as a quiet shadow beneath the tree that grows beside a river without a source. Some say they saw him drawing the shapes of wind on the surface of water. Some say he still writes a book no one can read, but everyone can understand. But most no longer remember him, and that is fine. For the world does not need heroes who know everything. It needs those who know how to listen when everything goes silent. Chapter 5. The Book That Writes Itself. After the war and his return to the quiet valley, AUREON thought he had reached the end of his path. But in his consciousness there remained another door, not physical, not divine, but internal, a door that opens only when you no longer want to find it. And one evening, while watching the shadows of the stars break on the surface of the river, he heard paper rustling, but there was no wind. He turned around and saw a book, from nowhere, old but not worn. Its pages were turning by themselves. They were blank, but radiated meaning. It was not a book of knowledge. It was a book of presence. When he placed his palm on its first page, words appeared, written in his handwriting, but not his will. This was the book that writes itself, the mirror of the soul and the witness of every moment, not recorded by the mind, but by the heart. Each page described a moment when he felt fear or tenderness, or when he remained silent instead of speaking. He understood. To understand the world, you first need to understand yourself. And to understand yourself, you must learn to write silence. AUREON continued to write, not to learn something new, but to preserve what must not be forgotten. Chapter 6. The City Beneath the Roots. Guided by an unclear feeling, AUREON left the valley. This time he was not searching nor wandering. He simply followed the whisper of the earth. Thus he arrived at the rooted threshold, the place where trees no longer grow toward the sky, but toward the depths. There he found a forgotten city, Neveleth, buried beneath the roots of ancient forests. In that city there were no people, only presence. In every stone, in every mosaic tile, he could feel the love of something no longer here. It was a city of those who lived before the first thought, not as beings, but as feelings. They did not build temples, but emotions. The city was their memory. AUREON walked its streets and did not ask anything. He only listened and began to feel everything he had forgotten. The scent of the first rain, the touch of a hand, the sigh before a kiss, the fear when someone trusts you. And then he understood. Knowledge is cold, but wisdom is warm. The city of Neveleth was not knowledge. It was the memory of the heart. At the exit of the city, the trees bent toward him as if greeting him or thanking him. Chapter 7. The sea that does not reflect the sky. His path led him further to the sea without mirrors. The surface of this sea was dark, dense, and never reflected anything. Not a person, not stars. The story said that the sea holds all that we have discarded, our face when we do not look at it, words we have not spoken, thoughts we have denied. AUREON sat by the shore and watched it for days. He did not try to understand, nor to find meaning. He was simply there. And in that presence, the sea showed him its depths, not the ones beneath the water, but the depths of himself. All the sorrows he had ever felt, but did not know how to name. All the longings he had pressed between his ribs. Every smile he gave to others while he was empty inside. The sea did not show them to break him. It showed them to free him. For true peace does not come when you defeat the darkness. It comes when you stop hiding it. Chapter 8. The Forest Without Boundaries. At the boundary between worlds where maps no longer apply, there was the forest without end. In it, trees grew that remembered the future, and steps never led backward. In this forest, time did not go forward. It went inward. While walking, AUREON did not see images, but possibilities. Each of his steps created a new path, and every choice stood before him like a branching point. The forest did not tell him where to go. It only showed him where he could, where he may, and where he never would. He stayed there for a long time, or a short time. He didn't know. Finally, he reached a clearing where there was nothing, only light. It did not come from the sun, but from within, and in that light he felt the last truth. There is no right path, only sincerity in walking, and the forest let him pass. Chapter 9. The Return of the Shard. In the final chapter of his journey, AUREON returned to the place where it all began, not to Eleutherion, but to the place within himself where he first asked the question. He sat beneath the sky. The stone from the sea lay in his palm. The shard of luminor that the child had given him glowed faintly, warmly. In that moment, everything connected. He no longer needed to search. He no longer needed to write. The book that wrote itself closed its last page. The stars flickered in silence. The wind was gentle, and the silence was no longer empty. Aureon closed his eyes, and the world continued to move without the need for him to understand it. Chapter 10. The Mirror of Time. In the heights beyond the clouds, above thoughts and even beyond memories, floated a temple without doors. It was called the Mirror of Time, but it had no walls or glass. It was built of quieter moments, touches that never came, words that could have been spoken but were not. Aureon reached it, guided by a dream. In the temple there were no gods, only the presence of time, not as a flow, but as a circle. And at the center of that circle was himself, in all the forms he could ever be. The child who dreams of stars, the young man who draws impossible dragons, the learned man who unlocks the doors of the world, and the old man who is silent as the wind passes by. All of them stood together. They did not speak. They only looked at each other and nodded softly, without judgment, without sorrow. For time does not ask us to be perfect, only to be present. Aureon left the temple with a smile, small, quiet, but deep. For the first time in a long time, he did not carry a burden. Chapter 11. The Bottomless Lake. A few days later, he reached the lake without a bottom, a place older than light. They say it is the last trace of the world's first tear. Its surface was as smooth as glass, and its color indescribable, neither blue nor black, but existence itself. Aureon sat beside the lake and watched it for days. He did not try to understand, nor to find meaning. He was just there. And in that presence, the lake showed him its depths, not the ones beneath the water, but the depths of himself, all the sorrows he had ever felt, but never knew how to name, all the longings he had pressed between his ribs, every smile he gave to others while he was empty inside. The lake did not show them to break him, it showed them to free him. For true peace does not come when you defeat the darkness, it comes when you stop hiding it. Chapter 12. The Letter Without a Recipient. One morning, Aureon found a feather, ordinary, gray, but perfectly straight. Beside it, a piece of parchment, without scent, without weight. On it stood a single question, written by a hand he did not know. Who are you when no one is looking? He was not afraid. He was not surprised. He simply sat down and began to write. He did not write about gods, nor about worlds. He wrote about himself, about how he loved silence, about how he sometimes forgot to breathe while watching clouds, about how he once fell in love with the smile of someone who did not know him, about how he searched for truth and found himself. That letter had no recipient, nor did it need one. In the evening, the parchment disappeared on its own, gone, but not forever, for every word that is truly written always remains, somewhere, to someone, when it is most needed. Chapter 13. The Silence That Sings. In the final part of his journey, Aureon stopped in a place without a name. It was a vast expanse of pure air, without color, without form, but not without a soul. There was nothing to see, but there was something to hear. Silence, but not dead silence, the kind that sings. It was the song of everything that ever was and everything that never will be, a sound that does not come from the outside, but from the world itself, a song that does not require hearing, but presence. Aureon sat, breathed, and listened, and then, finally, he felt he no longer had to search. Everything he had ever needed was already there. Chapter 14. The Name That Is Not Spoken. He returned one last time to Eleutherion. The city still existed, but differently. New generations walked its streets. No one recognized him, and it didn't matter. His old name no longer belonged to him, for the true trace remains not through glory, but through the peace you leave behind. In silence, at the entrance to the city, on a stone was engraved a sentence no one knew how to translate. The one who sought has found silence. And people wondered who that was, and children dreamed of the traveler who draws the wind, and birds sang a song without words. AUREON left for the last time, not from the city, but from the world. But he did not disappear, for he was not a body, nor even a thought. He became the pause in every song, the whisper before the first word, the silence that brings peace. When the world wakes up somewhere, far from known lands and names, there is a place that no one can find on a map. It is not on the loud places, nor in memories, but everyone carries it within themselves. That place is not a city, nor a mountain, nor an island. It is a state. Peace without conditions, silence without fear. There, when the night becomes as soft as a palm, and the air quiets like a breath before sleep, you can feel him, not as a presence, but as a closeness. AUREON is no longer a name. He has become what remains when everything else is gone. He has become the peace between two thoughts, the glimmer of morning dew on a leaf, the feeling that everything will be all right, even when you don't know how. In the worlds that came after him, people still built, destroyed, searched, and doubted. They wrote books, celebrated gods, waged wars over ideas, and loved as if it was the first time. And they did not mention him, because they did not know. But he was there, in the pause between heartbeats. At dawn, when the birds sing the first note, and the wind has yet to decide whether it will come from the south, a child looked up at the sky. They knew nothing about AUREON, but in their hands they held a shard of glass on which his reflection was not visible, only a star, and that was enough. In some forest, a tree that never had a name whispered its song to the leaves that had not yet fallen. In its bark, thin lines like sentences, but without words, and every bird that landed there sang quieter than before, somewhere under the water, deep beneath the lake. Without a bottom, a stone with a star carved in its center remains. No one is searching for it anymore, but it still waits, not to be found, but to remind. In a time that has not yet arrived, when people forget the difference between light and darkness, someone will bend down to pick up an old leaf from the ground, and on it they will see nothing, but their heart will flutter without knowing why, and then, for a moment, the world will again be complete, because the world does not last as long as the breath. The world lasts as long as there is someone who guards what cannot be explained. AUREON never sought immortality, and because of that, he became eternal, not in the body, not in glory, but in the silence that people keep when they see something they cannot explain and know that it is truth. And that is why, when you next walk without a goal and think that you are lost, perhaps you are not. Perhaps you are simply near the place where he sits, without a voice, without a shape, waiting for you to stop, to breathe, to remember, not him, but yourself.